Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, bowl season is upon us. We'll get into the selections across the Big 12. We'll get into the college football playoff, what was gotten right, maybe what was gotten wrong. And, of course, as it pertains to your Red Raiders, it is Houston. Coming up next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Glad to have you along for the ride once again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. With the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan, and Chris kicking open the door to this week with a confirmation of what we speculated upon to wrap up last week. It is Houston, Texas that will be the scene, and it will be the Red Raiders in the Texas Bowl for the first time in about a handful of years, but got some experience, obviously, in this game in prior seasons. We did discuss an opponent from the SEC, but it wasn't until later in the week that you're giving me some idea that maybe it's not the Hogs, maybe it is the Rebels, and that's how it winds up. Texas Tech and Ole Miss got a little grudge to settle here from, I don't know, over a decade ago, 2008-2009 Cotton Bowl.
Yeah, I think this is obviously a more high-profile, team, or had a better season. Maybe that's the way I should phrase that. Arkansas finished 6-6. They're headed to Memphis to take on the Jayhawks, but I think the 8-4 Ole Miss Rebels are going to be a more than you want from an opponent standpoint. They were really good. They just kind of, I think we're 7-0. I think is right, and then lost 4 of their last 5 games to LSU, Bama, and on it went, and Mississippi State to end the season in the Egg Bowl. But
smoked by Arkansas.
Yeah, they were
kind of a strange season.
Yeah, it reminds me of kind of Cliff's first season when he was the head coach at Tech. Start off 7-0, and then you just limp to the finish line and you end up winning a bowl game. Let's hope that Ole Miss doesn't have exactly the same kind of season and win their bowl game. We want the Red Raiders to win that one, but this is. I think, and people misunderstand, I think, in some ways, like how the bowl selection process works. We kind of touched on this some last week, Casey, in that you're not owed anything. There's certain things that you're guaranteed if you are finished ranked at a certain spot or if you're the conference champion. After that, it's really a selection process to where bowl reps and things like that, they can work with the league or whatever, but they kind of look out for their own best interest on TV ratings, ticket sales, whatever they want to do. And maybe they have already one opponent locked in that's going to sell the tickets, and so they want to put, the biggest, quote unquote brand together. Who knows? But, people are frustrated you're not going to Orlando. But, man, I get it. I understand the way that the process works. But I think in some ways this allows you to kind of take over Houston on December the 28th and really have a home game type environment, And this is a stadium, Casey, that, you faced this same Ole Miss team to open up the season in 2018 and what would be Cliff's last season. Thankfully, you don't have to try to guard or cover DK Metcalf and A.J. Brown in this game like you did in that one, because that is not a winning proposition.
Did not go well.
Yeah, that's right. And obviously, you faced Ole Miss in the 2009 Cotton Bowl, but you won a big game in this same stadium last year to open up the season versus the University of Houston. We know what that game meant at the time, and Houston would really go on to have a phenomenal season last year. So you're no stranger to this city, this stadium, and playing games here, whether it be the beginning of season or the end of the season. And I think it ought, again, you haven't fared just, you beat Minnesota there, you've beaten Navy there, you beat, East Carolina, I guess way back, that was in the Astrodome. But LSU and Ole Miss and some of those games haven't gone your way. But I think this will be a lot of fun because You win your last 3 games going into this bowl game. Ole Miss has lost 4 of their last 5 and has lost 3 in a row going into this game. So you kind of enter into this game feeling a bit differently about yourself and your season.
It's going to be a beer vendor's delight. Will any bowl game feature more beer drink than this one between Rebel fans and Red Raider fans? I'm not so sure, so we'll keep that in mind. But Chris, I was curious. I wanted to get some insight from you on how you think the opponent conversation kind of shifted as we got into the weekend. It was after we had our last conversation on air for the week last week that you started mentioning more so to me Ole Miss than Arkansas. How did that process kind of play out?
I think they just wanted the team that had the better record. I think it shifted. I think there was some thought that, and again, there was a few things that had to play out. You know, if LSU pulls the upset against Georgia in the conference championship game, it would have affected the order here and kind of what would have happened maybe a bit. But I don't know what else needed to happen over the weekend to kind of alter some of that order or what matchups were trying to be put together and things like that. But I think one thing I can tell you is that the Texas Bowl folks felt really, because I think this game last year was Kansas State and LSU. And if you remember, LSU had a hard time putting the team out there. They had a ton of opt-outs. They had a coaching change. I mean, and Kansas State just won it in a bloodbath, and it was just kind of non-competitive. And I think that the Texas Bowl wanted to try to go after a couple of programs where they would largely have their team in place. You know, there hasn't been a coaching change here with either program. You know, Lane Kiffin, if anything, he's got a brand new contract, and there was a lot of rumors about him going to Auburn. He's got a brand new contract that's going to pay him a ton of money. Shout out to super agent Jimmy Sexton for getting that done for his client in Lane Kiffin. But there was a lot of stability with these two programs. Not that there would have been with Arkansas or anything, but I think that's kind of what they were looking at, and just trying to put together the best matchup they could. Because Ole Miss for much of the season, they were ranked top 10, top 15, and the wheels kind of fell off. And, you know, but you Casey, you look at their running game, look out, man. I mean, the Red Raiders are no stranger to this all season, but they've got a kid named Zach Evans, played at TCU last year and transferred. Everybody thought that was going to really hurt the Frogs. It did not. And he ran for nearly 900, but they've got a freshman there that ran for like 1,500 yards. Yeah. So, I mean, they ran for over 300 in 6 of their games and ran for over 400 in 2 of those games, one of which they lost.
Right.
Okay. They lost to Arkansas and ran for over 400 yards. Never heard of such a thing. But no, this is going to be all the Red Raiders want, and it's really all about motivation and kind of how you approach these games. You know, I would guess the Red Raiders will be more excited about playing this one than Ole Miss, who thought maybe we have a chance to play for the SEC championship. Maybe we have an outside shot at a New Year's Six bowl and all those kinds of things. But that kind of quickly evaporated, and all that's left is a giant Lane Kiffin brand new contract.
And shout out to former Lubbock, Texas reporter John Sokoloff for also doing his part in getting in that new contract. Hilarious.
Right.
Hilarious.
Yes.
Spent some time in the 806, was gooberish, then still going goober in Oxford, it seems like. Chris, something about the Southwest Conference makes me a little disappointed to not have the Hogs on the opposing sideline. Yeah. I like the chance to beat a team that had a better record and a little bit more of a national relevancy this season, though, in Ole Miss. But I don't know what to make out of their season, man, because you look at like their best win on paper, and it's over at that time a top 25 Kentucky team. I think a top 10 Kentucky team possibly at that point in time. And then, of course, where'd the Wildcats go? And you look at, you're kind of doing the same thing Texas did, waving a flag about getting close against Alabama. Woo! And then you're smoked by the 6-6 Razorbacks, 42-27. You lose by 2 to Leach in the Egg Bowl finale. I'm having trouble kind of gauging what this 8-4 is versus the Texas Tech 7-5. So I'm really intrigued by the matchup, man. I think it should be a really tight one.
It kind of goes back to how you can have these records and some of the records feel differently, or there's some empty 8-4s. There's some, maybe legit feeling 7-5s. Maybe that's what we have here. But again, an 8-win season in the SEC. And again, I think Ole Miss maybe had higher expectations this year. I think there's been a lot placed on Jackson Dart, their sophomore quarterback. He first year as a starter, and obviously their freshman tailback who had a monster season. So, but I don't pretend to know how Ole Miss feels or how they feel now or expectations and all those things, because so much surrounding their program had to do with Lane Kiffin in the last 2 to 3 weeks. And that noise was really loud. I think he burned up some equity there in Oxford because of the flirtation and some of the noise that he didn't, I guess, shoot down. I'm guessing, and until it was too late, and then, Auburn end up going a different direction. So that part I don't know, but he's going to be an interesting guy throughout the process. I will tell you too that former Texas Tech quarterback Seth Dagey is on that staff and works along on the offensive staff there in Oxford. So there's your one connection.
And I will tell you that he had a brother that wanted to play quarterback at Texas Tech, but was not offered. And that's probably going to be mentioned on the broadcast if they ever mention Seth Dagey or the Dagey family. Shout out to the Dageys. Looking forward to it, man. Got a nice primetime window there on that Wednesday night, December 28th. Was a little bit intrigued by who I feel like, I think if my understanding is correct, you're going to be overlapping with from a television standpoint, the Holiday Bowl. There was talk of Notre Dame being in that bad boy, which is obviously a ratings or attention challenge for anybody else doing anything at the same time. But that's going to be UNC Oregon now out in San Diego. So I think you could wind up with quite a few eyeballs on your game, and hopefully those eyeballs are seeing Texas Tech do some good things. We got plenty of time, courtesy of this goofy timeline that college football has put together for their postseason, to break down what's going to happen between the lines. About 3 weeks, as a matter of fact. So buckle up for every excruciating detail on Locked On Texas Tech in episodes to come. Coming up directly ahead, we're staying in a bowl game frame of mind. We'll take a look elsewhere across the Big 12 slate of postseason matchups. Certainly some intriguing ones there, and one of those involving a college football playoff semifinal. We'll get to that coming up next on Locked On Texas Tech. But first, today's episode brought to you by Omaha Steaks. The holidays are here, and achieving gifting greatness is easy when you're getting down with Omaha Steaks, because you're giving the gift of perfectly aged, tender, and delicious beef, baby. The steak experts at Omaha Steaks have put together special curated gift packages to help take the guesswork out of gifting and make you a holiday hero. So go to omahasteaks.com and use our code LOCKEDON. That's LOCKEDON. Our promo code LOCKED ON at omahasteaks.com, and you're going to get, bang, $30 off your order. Ready to ship your order right away. So shop early, beat the shipping rush. Go to omahasteaks.com and use the promo code LOCKED ON at checkout. It's going to be a gift from the heart, and a gift that'll be remembered with every unforgettable bite. So order with complete confidence today, knowing you're ordering the very best at omahasteaks.com with our promo code LOCKED ON for $30 off your order. Minimum order may be required, again, at omahasteaks.com. Thanks for joining us on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. With the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan, coming at you out yonder, west of the 100th Meridian, where it's really going down. Thanks for subscribing on YouTube if you have. If you have not, what are you waiting for? What do you think, the test drive is just going to last forever? This tank is going to run out at some point without being refilled by your subscription. So please join us as a subscriber on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Talking Texas Tech and Ole Miss a moment ago. It is the Texas Bowl that will be the destination for the Red Raiders, December 28th. And we'll have a few weeks to break down that matchup. But otherwise, in the Big 12, Chris, man, you got some bangers as far as some matchups. I think obviously Baylor has got the least to be excited about as they go to the Armed Forces Bowl, and they're going to take on Air Force. So you get a smaller opponent, and you're going to smack around a service academy.
Well, but you have here's the irony, and this is what I was like, okay, you get to, because I mean, weeks ago we started looking at possibilities once you beat Iowa State and you're bowl eligible. you start looking at the different pecking order, and you don't know the options, and there's still some football left to play, and you had not beaten Oklahoma yet. I looked at some of this, and one of the games that I looked at, and I thought, please no, you play that game in Amon Carter Stadium in Fort Worth. So
Is that right?
Yes. So the fact that Baylor
Okay.
has to play their bowl game at TCU Stadium when TCU is in the playoff is cruel and unusual punishment.
Oh, yeah. You want to use this thing for a game? Oh, yeah. We're not using it. Sure, I guess. We'll rent it out to you at a fair. I thought that was an SMU campus game.
No, that there's another one that's
okay.
that is at Gerald Ford Stadium. Yeah,
Good.
the First Responders Bowl or something. I think.
Okay.
Yeah, so, but yeah, the Armed Forces Bowl originally was like the Bell Helicopter Bowl there, General Dynamics there in Fort Worth. But no, I believe that's at TCU Stadium. So I was just like, because think about it, if Tech would have been the same way, right. Having to go play a game in that stadium would have just been. Yeah, I don't even want to even get my mind there after all the ticket hubbub and all the
right,
all the stuff. Yeah, so
you would just hope if you had to do that, everybody was carrying prickly pear cactus seeds in pockets with holes in them all around the stadium, all across the field, up and down, yard line to yard line. But we don't have to worry about that. Baylor and the Air Force in the Armed Forces Bowl. Go ahead and kick a service academy. Why don't you? See how we respond to that as Americans. Good luck. Guaranteed Rate Bowl, ridiculous name, and they couldn't even put on a bowl game a couple of years ago. So how do we know that a rate is going to be guaranteed? I don't really know. But either way, it's Oklahoma State, Wisconsin, Big 12, Big 10, and you got to like that, Chris. I'm pretty interested here. 7-5, 6-6. Go the Cowboys and the Badgers. This one, December 27th.
Yeah, and I believe I have seen that Luke Fickell will be involved in the coaching for Wisconsin at some level. So I don't know at what level or anything. And you've got a few guys for Oklahoma State that have entered the portal prior to this bowl game announcement. So, we'll kind of see. Again, bowl season is tricky, man. There's a lot that goes on with these programs between now and when these games are played. You don't know who's showing up with what. But, I mean, Wisconsin will be very motivated, and you wonder what Oklahoma State will be able to give you. Does Spencer Sanders play in this game? Is he healthy finally? But, no, it's on paper, it's a really good matchup.
This one pretty interesting as well, just because I'm curious to see if Kansas can culminate a dream 500 season with a win over an SEC opponent. It's Kansas and Arkansas in the Liberty Bowl. This is Memphis, right?
Yep, that's where the Red Raiders were last year. That's the game actually on ESPN just prior to the Red Raiders and Ole Miss Rebels. So that's a 5:00 kick, and so don't be surprised if the Red Raiders and Rebels end up starting a bit later than actually 8:00, as it gives time for Kansas and Arkansas to finish up.
Go ahead and find ESPN News on your guide right now. So
right now, it is. Yeah. But this game kind of puts Arkansas and the Hog fans in kind of a no-win spot here, man. Sam Pittman and crew, they were top 10 early on in the season. They kind of had things rolling, and then they just KJ Jefferson just kind of the wheels fell off, and he got hurt and just wasn't able to play. But Kansas will be motivated. They're going to play hard. I'll be shocked if they don't play well. They're not, I don't think, going to have anybody that opts out. They've been years without getting to a bowl game, and they are back. And even though they limped to the finish line, it's a much different feel than what Arkansas went through. But I would say for Arkansas, it's going to be a tough game for the old Hogs there.
Red Raiders and Ole Miss follow that one, as Chris mentioned, from Houston there, December 28th. 5:30 the following afternoon, the Cheez-Its Bowl, which has really challenged me personally as a longtime Cheez-It man. You all know why. You know the storyline. It's 6-6 Oklahoma against 9-3 Florida State, Chris. And still processing my feelings on how all this has gone down. I got to be honest with you. I'm not mad at the matchup that Texas Tech has wound up with at all, but I also certainly understand what has been mentioned and acknowledged many times in that players earn throughout the season, supposedly, the right to go to X bowl game here or there and all the experiences that come with it. And for whatever it's worth now, instead of riding the teacups at Disneyland, you got to hop in with Paul Wall and just swing and swing and swing to the left and pop your trunk for Fat Pat's death, possibly. Such is life, I guess, but I do understand the frustration, man.
Yeah. So what the Cheez-It Bowl is thinking is that, okay, we've got the local team that's going to carry ticket sales in Florida State. And so, because what happens is, okay, TCU goes to the playoff, Kansas State goes to the Sugar Bowl, and then they pick right after the Alamo Bowl. They can take any team that's left. And so the Alamo Bowl takes Texas. And so they can pick anybody they want. And I think they go for biggest brand, period. And even though some of those kids for Oklahoma, most notably Eric Gray, not going to play in this game, I think that the general casual observer watching TV, probably doesn't know about a lot of those things and just sees Florida State, Oklahoma. Hey man, I'm in.
Yeah.
And maybe they feel like Florida State would have rather have played Oklahoma on any given year than a Texas Tech team. It has nothing to do with who's better or what record you finish with or anything like that. It's a business, and they're trying to, sell the most tickets, get the most people to watch it, whatever. So, the one thing, okay, Orlando would have been fun for those kids for Texas Tech and a new setting and experience and all that. So that's the bad part is they're going to go to Houston, which is a place they've been before. However, the payoff is you'll have it'll feel like a home game in some ways. So there's some good and bad there. Whereas if you go to Orlando, you're on the teacups, you're riding Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, all that stuff. The photo shots would have been awesome and the roller coasters and all that stuff. But there wouldn't have been near as many people in Orlando from a Tech standpoint. And you would have played kind of in a semi-road environment there with Florida State carrying it, I think. So that's the that's the rub there. But you have no control over it. You can't – there's nothing you can do about it. These bowl folks, that's just the way it works. They get to – it's a draft, essentially. They get to pick. I think only the SEC – does it the way that they do it, in that their commissioner kind of works with the schools because their conference is so large and they have so many bowl tie-ins, and they almost they worked it into their contracts to where they kind of mix and mash, and it can kind of go out of order and kind of be, they try to keep matchups from happening, maybe like Texas A&M and previously, where they would have kept the Aggies away from the Red Raiders. I was in some ways surprised that they put Mississippi State and Mike Leach against Texas Tech last year. Maybe that's just the way it fell. And it's like, hey, Mike, you got to go take one for the team here, bud. I don't know. I don't know. But that's just kind of the way it fell. But we knew as of middle last week that it was all pointing toward the Red Raiders in Houston. And I get it. I get the frustration, but I'm also okay with it too, because I've been in that stadium when you have a ton of fans in there, and it's a great environment. And I think it helps you. So we'll see.
Yeah. And I'm not turning my back on Cheez-Its, man. Not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. College football's silly approach to a postseason eventually makes fools of us all. You can't ever make an argument that's consistent. You can't. I mean, Nick Saban's on national television talking about gambling lines the other day to try to get his team into the playoffs.
Well,
and we finished all of us.
We finished 3-0, guys. One of those wins was against Austin Peay, I think. I mean, seriously, man. Like TCU almost finished 12-0. I mean,
incredible.
So I mean,
it's Texas, Washington, Alamo Bowl. You already mentioned the Sugar Bowl, Alabama, K-State. So obviously those are going to be interesting ones as well.
I think you have. I mean, you have really good matchups here, man. There's just not really a throwaway to where you're like, that's a boring one. I mean, because even the Baylor Air Force game is a very intriguing because of the style of play that Air Force employs with that option attack and Troy Calhoun and all that. So, and I think Washington, obviously anytime that Pac-12 team comes into San Antonio, Texas, more often than not, it's a road environment. Mm-hmm. I don't know how excited or who will actually play in that game for the Longhorns, but I believe Michael Penix is the quarterback for Washington, and he's been a handful all season, the former Indiana player. He's a good player and all that. Because, I mean, last year it was kind of an Oklahoma party at the hands of Oregon, who had had a coaching change and all those things. They were in the midst of they had lost their coach to University of Miami, and Dan Lanning had yet to take over, so it was kind of a shorthanded situation. So I guess, Casey, in most cases, this is one of the first times I can really remember where most of the coaching stuff is all largely put to bed. And these bowl announcements are made with all of that in the rearview mirror. You kind of know there'll be some coordinator stuff and some things that trickles down, but largely coaches they've already kind of made their moves. There's not a whole lot left out there to be undecided there.
Alamo Bowl will be a good preview of a future SEC Big Ten bowl matchup between the Huskies and the Longhorns, so we can look forward to that.
I see what you did there. I like it. Yeah.
All right, we're drawing a hard line here. There's one we haven't mentioned, but we're going to add it to a different conversation. We're talking college football playoff coming up ahead. We'll digest everything that went down from Cowboys Stadium in Arlington. And yes, the Frogs, those Frogs with a pathway to the national championship. We'll get into all that and more, as now we are staring down the barrel of an expanded playoff coming to fruition. Thankfully, now that the Rose Bowl gods have descended from upon high and said, okay, just don't touch our parade. And we found that agreeable. So a whole lot to process as we are thankfully in the waning years of this, whatever this was.
How do you feel about parades, by the way? You sign off on a parade, or
I'm generally pro parade.
Okay.
Pro parade, but in the right context, Chris. In the right context.
Like as a spectator, or do you want to be on a float with the wave?
I don't think I've ever been in a parade. No, spectator mostly. Spectator.
Okay.
Mostly just to see. I think I have a pro parade view because as a child, I was fortunate enough to watch a hometown parade every year that featured my man Garland Kuntz, even to the point like he was 110 years old, riding a horse and playing a trumpet by himself. That was just one of the feature acts. And he always seemed a little out of control. Like, I might stomp a kid over here. Tuck, 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 tuck. Oh, no. He's in control, folks. He's in control. And the trumpet may be a little out of tune. Doesn't matter. He's putting on a show. So that was the beginnings of my parade appreciation. Do you have some parade trauma of some kind? Or what?
No. I'm just I think I'm largely anti-parade.
Okay.
I liked the Thanksgiving Day parade growing up. Years ago, my grandparents actually went to the Tournament of Roses parade and the Rose Bowl game. It was 20, 30 years ago. But yeah, I just, parades are interesting because we used to get the Orange Bowl parade. We got the Cotton Bowl parade. We got a lot.
Okay.
That was kind of New Year's Eve morning or New Year's Eve day, or New Year's Day, I guess morning. You get a lot of the parades and stuff like that. I just remember that as a kid, but they were kind of synonymous with these bowl games. But I think really the Rose Bowl is the one that still sticks. And I don't know why they call it the Tournament of Roses parade. I don't know what a tournament. Are these the roses that won some competition and they get to be, on a float? I don't know, but anyways.
I'm thinking back now on my childhood parade experience, and I see why I'm pro parade even more so than Garland Kuntz playing a trumpet on a horse that's slightly out of control. And this is in Littlefield, Texas, America, Pearl of the Plains. Don't get it twisted. I also was witness to a parade where in the same Cadillac convertible, Uncle Jesse from Dukes of Hazzard, Waylon Jennings, and Santa Claus. What is there not to like about a parade like that? Right?
Those are almost all one and the same.
That's exactly right. Were they? That was the day I finally confirmed they weren't one and the same, I guess, because you saw three. But before, you'd never seen them all in the same room. Exactly.
Shout out to Uncle Jesse and his love of moonshine.
That's right.
Because they were always making moonshine off into the trees, man, on the Dukes of Hazzard back in the day, man. Back in the bush, So shout out to him.
Okay, I'm going to have to cross this out now because this was supposed to be the final portion of the program, the conversation I had compiled some notes on, but we just got into it right there. It's all right. Still got plenty left to get into. Yes. We'll get into that aforementioned college football playoff coming up dead ahead on Locked On Texas Tech. But first, today's episode brought to you by SimpliSafe. Men lie, women lie, but numbers do not lie. And the numbers tell you that SimpliSafe is the choice whenever it comes to your family and your home's security. Over 4 million people have made that call already, and you don't earn the trust of that many folks without doing something right. At SimpliSafe, your safety is the only thing that matters. They're protecting you with cutting-edge security technology powered by 24/7 professional monitoring agents who have always got your back. So customize the perfect system for your home in just a few minutes at simplisafe.com/lockedoncollege. That's simplysafe.com/lockedoncollege. And you can save 20% on your SimpliSafe security system when you sign up for an interactive monitoring plan and get your first month for free. So visit simplysafe.com/lockedoncollege to learn more, because there's no safe like SimpliSafe. Thanks for joining us on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Just giving you the rundown there in the Big 12 Conference as far as bowl matchups were concerned. One we did not mention because it's part of the college football playoff. That is Texas Christian and Michigan, 12-1, 13-0. They now go. That is December 31st at 3 o'clock. And of course, Chris, most recently, man, it was one for the ages between Texas Christian and Kansas State. I don't know that I've enjoyed many football games more so just as a neutral observer. And I think I really, at the end of the day, was mostly that. Than what we saw from Arlington, man. That game included everything, including what felt like to me a Heisman winning drive or two for Max Duggan, but he wasn't exactly allowed to go out on his shield for some reason in some of the final moments, man. That game had a whole lot to process, didn't it?
Yeah, and you know where I've got mixed feelings on anything that involves the.
Are they mixed really, or are they all slanted one way?
Yeah, I just I hear a lot from the Fort Worth faithful. I thought that this was a game that, like you said, was so much better than the Pac-12, the SEC, and the ACC title game, and I guess the Big Ten to a certain extent too. Most of those games were fairly lopsided. This one was much like the league, much of the season, just very contested. I thought you had two teams, and I knew Kansas State was going to be really tough to beat again for TCU. Kansas State's just they're just really solid, man. And I'm looking at, and like the part about that game that I thought was interesting is that I'm like, are they going to have anybody left? I mean, Malik Knowles is over there. That's a major part of what they do on special teams and on offense. He's unable to finish the game. They were down several corners. Not the team you want to be facing when you're missing several cover corners like they were. And they had an offensive lineman go down, I think, late in the game as well. Maybe even their starting center is who it was. But I just was like, man, this is a game of – but, Max Duggan obviously playing through some injuries. I was surprised, one, that Sonny didn't do anything with those final, I guess, what was it, about 30 seconds or so. They were backed up on their end of the field, but I thought – you got all these weapons, and you got a quarterback that may in fact get invited to New York, and for you not to just like take a shot and just kneel it down and go to overtime, I thought was interesting. And maybe you're just trying to minimize your risk at that point. And I don't know.
When the quarterback's like half dead also, it seemed like.
Yeah, and that's true too.
I'm kind of with you, but I was trying to come up with a list of, okay, why would you do that? And that then was maybe one that was on there.
To elect to go for it on fourth down and overtime and not kick the field goal, I thought was interesting. Or to not utilize a QB sneak, and he says he was, it's because Max Duggan was slightly dinged up and things like that. But I just thought, not – because here's the thing: if for example, if TCU wouldn't have made it into the playoff, you couldn't gain a yard on 3 straight plays. I don't feel sorry for you, man.
No.
I mean, I just like if you are who people have suggested for you not to gain a yard or whatever, and we can argue about how the ball was spotted and all those things, but still, you're.
Well, and that's why I say it involved everything, because how about some of that, like the reviews and the spots, and did the homeboy break the plane? And I mean, it was just every second carried something that was so consequential.
A lot of drama. Yes. Yeah, a lot of drama. But they end up coming up short, and I think Kansas State, It may have been if you're like a Big 12 guy and we're wanting the best scenario for the Big 12 conference, maybe that was exactly it. Kansas State wins a very close game. And so they get the championship, and then TCU still gets to make it into the college football playoff. Yeah. I don't know, if what result everybody was rooting for, but they sweated it out a little bit, but they ended up making it into TCU. And then on Kansas State, you get Bama.
Yeah. Well, hey, you know what? I'd rather be going that route than, just as an example, as we shift into a bigger picture view on the college football playoff now and what's coming up in a couple of years. I'd rather go that route than go the USC route. Hey, here's Tulane. Congrats on a great season.
Golly. Yeah. And that's where
Tulane's fired up. They're there to take your heads off.
1,000%.
He's like,
Yep. And ask Kansas State about Tulane too.
Well, and Chris, here's what is going to be a major fix in all of this, I feel like, by the expanded playoff. The joke that we just made about this matchup goes out the window, because if you're in that game in the expanded format, you're playing still for a pathway to a national championship.
Correct.
Not like, oh, it's Tulane. No, it's the first game along the path to a national championship. And that's one of the things I'm most excited to get to, is the lessening of games, just by a fraction, still got a long way to go. But the lessening of games where you feature a matchup that is all about who's excited to be here. Is anybody glad to be here? That's always frustrated me about this time of year, that there's so many impacted by just that.
Yeah, and that's just the reality of it. I mean, I guarantee you're going to see a lot of Alabama guys go, man, I'm going to opt out, or I'm going to worry about the next portion of my career. I'm not going to play Kansas State. I mean, that's not what I showed up for. I mean, that's just the reality. And USC may do the same. I don't know, but because what you're talking about are games like USC and Tulane. If that's the opening round, that's just similar to the NCAA tournament. When you better be really good, or you're going to get beat. You're going to make news for the wrong reasons, and you're going to be out, and you don't have a chance to make some noise in the dance or anything like that. So, but going back to, did you have any issue with the order or the four that were chosen for the playoff in this particular?
I don't think I did. And putting all emotion aside, Texas Christian belonged in the playoff, in my opinion. And I'm still not so sure about the whole USC Ohio State swap. I hate not doing anything, getting you into something, which is what Ohio State did. And look, I know that the score was lopsided at the end of it for USC and whatever. That's another thing that I'm amped about when it comes time for the expanded college football playoff, is that you're not punished for this stupid 13th data point that these same idiots talked you into placing to begin with, which the Big 12 is like example one of who kind of got talked into, well, you need another data point. Now, they make a lot of cash. I get that they probably weren't all that against it anyway. But, Chris, whenever you're punished for earning your way to a conference championship game, bigger picture-wise, something about that don't sit right with me. And I think there are a lot of college football fans that feel that way. And I hate USC. Caleb Williams, I mean, way to represent a university with your fingernail polish every week. Good grief. But I'm still sitting, and I hate Texas Christian with the fire of 1,000 suns. But I'm still sitting here telling you, I'm not so sure that what you did in a conference championship game setting should be eliminating you from these types of things. It won't eventually when you got a bigger number. But that just frustrates me, man. The Ohio State thing frustrates me. How did you feel about those calls, kind of as they domino with one another? The inclusion of Texas Christian, the exclusion of USC, and then Ohio State in that spot.
Well, yeah, what USC had working against them, again, win and you're in, lose, and I just think they had no chance to get in because their defense was not very good. I think that had been called out, and it wasn't wrong. I mean, it was that they were just hanging on by their fingernails, to use your phrase a while ago, for much of the season. But it really came down to TCU, Ohio State, and Alabama. And the one thing about this Alabama team, they lose twice. Yes, they lost on the last play by 4 total points. I get all that, but it's like when you start looking at kind of what you were talking about with Ole Miss, like, who did you actually beat? What's the win that you're pointing to and going, oh yeah, that's one of the best. I mean, it was maybe Texas and Austin, and that was by a field goal. The Red Raiders did that. So
wait, Texas and Alabama can't both wave a banner for that same game because one of you won, one of you lost. So only one of you get to pimp this.
Yeah,
one,
that's right. So I just didn't think. And again, whether people have Alabama fatigue, I don't know. I'm surprised that because Ohio State has benefited greatly from the playoff. I have Ohio State fatigue as well. They've benefited greatly from a variety of things. Because what if you're Michigan? It's like we just unloaded on these dudes in their stadium, embarrassed them, and yet they're still in the tournament, and we may have to face them in the championship game.
Right.
Like what must the old Michigan faithful be thinking in Jim Harbaugh? So, but I didn't. If there was anything like, I'm trying to think of how to phrase this because, like, what was it? Because who scares you more right now, Ohio State or TCU? Like, if I were to ask you right now, Texas Tech was going to have to go play in a playoff game, so you think you're going to get best shot, TCU or Ohio State? Who scares you more?
I'd have to go with Ohio State, but a lot of what's popping into my mind is a limping Max Duggan, to be honest with you, right now.
Right, I got you. But see,
it's freaking Ohio State.
That's maybe the issue that you kind of had was that's what Georgia must be thinking. Like, we're supposed to get the 4 seed and we get freaking Ohio State. I mean, they may be the second most talented team in the country. That's not, I don't know, behind us. So I didn't know if maybe there were some people that had some issue with, but then again, the optics of putting Ohio State in at 3 and bumping TCU at 4 when you're right. Ohio State just sat at home, and the last time we saw them, they were getting worked. So it's just interesting. There's just not, when you just have 4 teams, man, there's just not a lot of room to maneuver it around a bit to kind of, but I could easily, if I'm Georgia, going, wow, this is just great, and they have an extra week of rest on us too, guys.
This is yeah, no kidding. This is part of what's so silly about the 100 plus years of college football. You've got a regular season that reconciles nothing from conference to conference. We got different conference games played, different out of conference requirements. Some people saddle up for some stuff, some people don't. And yet you then turn that over to a committee or to people or to the BCS or whatever and expect them to then determine based on all of these scattered and irreconcilable data points what should be slotted exactly where. It needs to be one or the other. If you got this goofy regular season where nobody does anything similar from conference to conference or the same from conference to conference, then you need the biggest damn postseason net to cast to just make sure you scoop up everybody that has any inclination towards being deserving of a pathway towards competing for a national championship. Or if you want to go committee in the postseason forever, then you need to have everything tailored to a T among these teams in the regular season to give you at least the nearest thing to a true picture of what a team's caliber is, which is impossible, by the way. Yeah. So you get what I'm saying? The bigger playoff, the better. But that's never made sense to me, Chris, because you get here at the end of it, and it's a fool's errand for all of these people to try to determine these things. Like, well, this team played 8 games, and they're in divisions. They didn't even see these other guys. Well, this team played 9 games, and then they added a conference championship on top of that, and they're playing Power 5 out of conference. Oh, it's just those two things have never matched up very well to me. And it's why we have so much frustration and so much weeping and gnashing of teeth. 12 will help that. The bigger, the better, in my opinion. But I've always felt like it was more realistic, Chris, to address these things in the postseason with casting a wider net, erring on the side of more inclusion, not less, as compared to ever thinking that you're going to get conferences to line up. And all right, boys, here's what the schedule is. Here's how many. Here's how often you're playing everybody in the league. Here's what you're doing out of the league. You and I both know that ain't going to happen. I mean, it's like coming up with whatever you can come up with from campus to campus for a regular season schedule, particularly out of conference. So I think the more realistic option is the path we're going towards, right? A bigger postseason net. So you just make sure that nobody really is being done wrong. And I mean, come on. You have your chance to win the game and get in. So I don't want to act like it's some tragedy if you lose the game and you're not in.
Right.
But the backing in of Ohio State or whoever else might have been in this position should never happen. Should never happen at the exclusion of somebody else that played that game. And so when you get to 12 and beyond, I think it'll help address that.
This was just a unique year in that there weren't a lot of teams with a lot of gripes just because there was so much losing at the tail end of the season. And you had a couple of teams that just had not lost, and so there wasn't a lot of teams knocking on the door there that a lot of people felt deserving. And again, like when the NCAA tournament rolls around, with this thing, if you don't like what you got, win more. Everybody control their
Right.
own situation. Just don't lose games, man. I mean, Nick. I mean, if they would have won one of those games instead of losing both of them, they might have had a different argument. But you lost twice, and you've gotten the benefit of the doubt more often than not. Had Ohio State gotten squeezed, I wouldn't have felt. I mean, don't get your ass kicked in your own home stadium by your rival. I mean, like there's no. I mean,
Right.
You could have controlled it. You fixed it, but
At the same time, Chris, as a college football fan and a fan of a program like Texas Tech, not a blue blood, I still am like, all right, yeah, I'd love to see something where you also throw in Alabama. You also throw in USC.
Yeah.
You also throw in
yeah.
K-State. You also throw in Tulane. Who doesn't want that?
Yeah, I completely agree. And we're gonna get, we just have this year and then next year, and then we're gonna get exactly what you want. In a quarterfinals the week right before Christmas. Then you're going to get all your on campus, yeah, absolutely. And then you're going to get your New Year's Eve, New Year's Day type scenarios, which will feature some semifinals and things like that. So yeah, this will be a lot of fun going forward. I think I'm looking forward to it because it was really fun to see. Here's what the playoff would have looked like had we had the 12 teams, and you just kind of get a glimpse like, oh wow, this is crazy.
It's gonna be fun someday.
Yep, absolutely.
We still got to bide some time here for a moment, but we are dragging this thing across that line after a century plus of trying to complicate it as much as possible so that guys in bow ties without televisions in their living rooms will still have something to do in a boardroom this time of year. I can't remember if it was Gordon Gee or Gene Smith or one of these goobers says an expanded playoff over my dead body. R.I.P. my guy. R.I.P. That may be real. I don't know if he's still with us or not.
With a bowl full of Cheez-Its right next to him.
That's right.
Yeah.
And there was a whole lot to process there as we get ready for bowl season. And of course, as I mentioned, we'll begin to get into Texas Tech and Ole Miss. And don't forget, we got Red Raider Hoops back in action coming up this week. So make sure you're subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you never miss an episode, as we will get back to setting the table for Mark Adams and company back at it from United Supermarkets Arena. We are back at it coming up on the other side tomorrow. Make us your first listen once again on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. And after Locked On Texas Tech, we hope that you'll make Locked On Sports Today your second listen. It's the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. Locked On Sports Today, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get podcasts. Chris, we're here. The regular season's in the rear view, and Texas Tech is still going to play another game. So we got what we asked for prior to the year at minimum. I can't wait to get ready for this over the next 3 weeks with you.
Basically, yeah, just a little over 3 weeks. It's going to go by very quickly. You got holidays coming up, but yeah, the Red Raiders headed to H-Town, man. It should be a lot of fun. Keep hope alive, people.
Heck yeah, and be back here tomorrow on the other side for another edition of Locked On Texas Tech.